Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Our topic today is managing compliance in container environments. It's hosted jointly by Amazon Web Services and Twistlock. My name is Omar Lari. I'm a partner solutions architect, and I work with our container ecosystem, so all of our partners who are developing technologies around containers to help our customers adopt them on AWS. I'm going to be your host speaker and moderator for today's webinar. So I'm just going to start off with some of the trends that we're seeing in cloud computing that we see a lot of our customers adopting in recent years. One of the main ones is around elasticity. Basically what this means is that you have the ability to scale out and contract your infrastructure and services on demand, only pay for the services that you need when you need it. So when services are being underutilized, you can go ahead and return those without having to pay for those. And then you can expand out when you have surges in demand for your services so that your users and customers have a good experience. Next really big point is around agility. So you have the ability to spin up infrastructure and services really quickly. Maybe you want to test out new ideas, re-architect existing services. The point is that you don't have to wait for infrastructure to get deployed into your own data centers. You have all of this available to you with the click of a button. And then lastly, high availability. So we have multiple data centers in regions across the globe, so this allows you to be close to where your users are, but in addition, it allows you to fail over to other data centers or other regions in case you're having problems with any of your infrastructure in a particular region. So you can build really highly available applications. Containers kind of extend a lot of that functionality and those features. So basically what a container is, I think most of the people on the webinar probably already know, but just to kind of sum it up, the container takes advantage of some Linux kernel constructs, mainly C groups, which allow you to allocate resources to processes and then namespaces to isolate those processes from one another. Another big benefit is that you get to package all of your application code, libraries, and dependencies into a single package and run those the same as you would run them on your desktop as you do in the cloud. So adding to a couple of the benefits that you see here on the slide, containers are immutable. What that means is that you're never going to log into a container and make any changes. You always make a change to the container image itself and then redeploy it. This provides you with a known state of your application environment at all times. You can be comfortable knowing that what you're running on your desktop is the same as how it will run in production. So what does this mean to you? One of the things that we didn't talk about is microservices. And microservices is basically a way to break up the application and the teams that develop and support them into smaller segments. So when you adopt microservices and containers, it means that you can make smaller and more frequent deployments to get features out to your users and customers at a higher velocity. Automating that release and deployment process gives you the comfort to deploy at a higher velocity, and containers help you do this and get your code from development into staging, production environments, and out to your users. Running in your containers in AWS also brings you a lot of benefits. So in addition to a lot of our basic platform services, you get integration into the rest of the AWS ecosystem. So we have services like DynamoDB and RDS, which help you persist your data inside databases, systems like SQS for queuing, Kinesis for streaming, a lot of management tools like CloudWatch events and logs that allow you to collect and gather metrics around your application. And we have a broad range of services across compute, networking, analytics, mobile to help customers be more productive and run their container workloads. The other thing is that we continue to add new capabilities and services at a pretty accelerating pace. Back in 2011, we had 80 significant services and features released. In 2012, that number jumped up to 160, and more recently, last year, 1,017 new services and features. And these are things that are just optional for customers. They don't have to use them, but they're there and they're available. And being able to run your workloads on the platform gives you access to all of those services. Next, as I mentioned earlier, we have a global footprint. There's 43 availability zones across 16 geographic regions worldwide. We expect an additional 3 AWS regions to come online through 2017 and 2018, which will be in France, China, and Sweden. So again, this allows you to build highly available applications close to where your customers are. Next point is around security. We've achieved a number of internationally recognized certifications and accreditations that enable customers to achieve their specific security and regulatory objectives. tools like CloudTrail, KMS, Inspector, they help you to really secure your environments. And then lastly, the partner ecosystem. So we have a rapidly growing ecosystem which provides customers with software solutions that extend AWS and some of the functionality that we have, and help customers use tools that they're accustomed to using in their more traditional environments and being able to use those in the cloud. So this slide shows our container ecosystem. So in the middle there, that blue box is really around orchestration, management, and scheduling. So these are going to be clustering systems that kind of fall into this bucket. And then on the top, we have network security and CI/CD products. So these are systems that help you adopt containers, secure your workloads, get them deployed, and be able to talk to each other. So we're going to hear a little bit from Paul around what features and functionality Twistlock brings. But here's some of the basic things that you've got. You've got a way to have preventative measures to make sure that vulnerabilities never make it into your running environment, a way to detect and scan for those vulnerabilities before they get into those further environments. And then a lot of integration into the tools that you commonly use today around CI/CD and some of the Docker registries for storing your images.
Thanks, Omar. My name is Patrick Maddox. I'm the Senior Director for Solutions Architecture here at Twistlock. Thanks to everybody for joining. I'm going to run you through a couple slides, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So here's what we've observed. Software is being pushed out of production and being developed quicker than it's ever been before. When you survey developers, 34% of them say they're building multiple times a day. Over 30% of them are releasing monthly or faster, and this puts a lot of pressure on organizations. It is both in response to business pressure to innovate and develop features, but it's also to develop. It's also requiring organizations to absorb change much faster. These are all linked to DevOps principles. The DevOps principles linked with container adoption really are driving the digital transformation. If you survey organizations, you can talk to them, and over half of them are already using containers in production or thinking about how they will use them in production. All of this velocity is coupled with another aspect, is there are tighter regulatory environments that enterprises are continually being measured against. Whether you're talking about an e-commerce provider working against PCI, FISMA for federal organizations, HIPAA for healthcare organizations, or GDPR, just another government standard. You've got a collision of velocity with the standards that are governing data security. And it's important to note that not adhering to the compliance standards that your organization is being measured against, it can be very expensive. Some surveys have shown that the per incident cost with failure to protect information in a healthcare environment can cost $50,000. The average cost of a healthcare breach is $7 million. Incredibly expensive not adhering to the compliance standards. So you've got this evolution of infrastructure that you're managing, where apps are deployed, how they're being packaged, where they're being run, where those workloads are being controlled. Enormous flexibility delivered, and enormous capability delivered by service providers like Amazon, but you still have to have regulatory controls over all this data. So this is where Twistlock can help in combination with a service provider such as Amazon. Twistlock is a cloud-native security solution. We are built for the modern era. You get security tools that you can apply in your development lifecycle. You get security tools that you can apply across checking the images as they're developed into registries, and even down into your runtime environment. So think about Twistlock security and compliance software giving you tools that you can span the entire development lifecycle down to running applications in production, and then the complete containerized stack. So AWS is your service provider, whatever operating systems you're running on top of AWS services, the Docker engine, whatever you're using from an orchestration perspective, then even up to the apps and how those apps are built and communicating with each other once they're instantiated inside containers. Twistlock's giving you a complete solution for security and compliance across the entire infrastructure. All right. So why Twistlock? So we started in early 2015 as the first purpose-built solution for this world. We've got 13 patents pending. We have an independent security research team that goes out and discovers vulnerabilities in 0 days in the ecosystem of tools that we participate against. We're the market leader. We've got over 60 different customers around the world, and we're providing those customers with 24/7, 365 enterprise-grade support that they can rely on to run their enterprises. So not just securing their enterprises, but depending on Twistlock operationally. We're also the ecosystem leader from a technology perspective. We built the authorization framework in Docker and OpenShift. We built the secrets management capabilities in Docker Swarm. There was a NIST, National Institute of Science and Technology, just released a new publication, NIST SP 800-190. We're one of the lead authors on that, and it's really sort of the definitive container security guide that's being referenced around the globe as people try to adapt to a container security profile. And finally, we're the launch partners for Amazon's container services. So what does Twistlock give you? On top of the compliance, which we'll go into a little more detail, Twistlock's giving you cloud-native firewalling. We're giving you a comprehensive set of runtime defense. We're giving you end-to-end vulnerability management, all the stretching compliance and vulnerability management all the way back to the start of your development lifecycle and carrying all the way into your runtime environment. We've mentioned compliance, and we're also giving you a set of access control capabilities so you can govern access to this containerized stack. So Twistlock does this in a couple different ways. And so what we're going to talk about now is the sort of high-level architecture of Twistlock. We're going to talk about the four main components: Twistlock's intelligence stream, the console, the Defender, and the CI plugins. We're going to go through this in a clockwise orientation, starting at the top left. The Twistlock intelligence stream is where we gather all the threat and CVE information from over 30 different upstream providers. Those are operating system vendors, package maintainers, private feeds, our own independent security research, zero-day feeds from Exodus and Proofpoint. We compile those into an intelligence stream, and that's consumed by the Twistlock console. Now, the Twistlock console can live in any environment that you want. Say you're living in AWS. No data is ever sent from your environment up to Twistlock. The Twistlock intelligence stream is consumed only by the console. You can also, if you live in an air-gapped environment, you can also update the intelligence stream data on the console offline or via sneakernet, really up to you. The console is the graphical interface and the API endpoint. Everything in the product is driven by APIs. They're all open and documented. But it's really where you do where all the automation is built in, where you do any manual configuration if you want it. And the console takes all this policy data and intelligence that it's gathered and pushes it down to the next major component, which is Twistlock Defender. Now, the Twistlock Defender lives on every single host running Docker in your infrastructure. The Defender is a container, just like any other container you would run. It sits sideband to all the other containers, and that's really how Twistlock's able to do the policy enforcement, the protection to protect the environment. That Defender sends event data back up to the console, and that console can write all of this data out to any standard syslog or any other tool that you may be using as a single pane of glass from a security operations perspective. There are two more components to really talk about. The Defender also serves as a registry scanner, so you can hook the Twistlock Defender up to Amazon's container registry and have it proactively scan all the images checked into that registry. We also support webhooks, so you can kick off scans and send alerts however you need to. And the last major component to talk about is it helps us push a lot of the security left in the development cycle. Twistlock ships with a native Jenkins plugin, but we also ship with a set of tooling that allows you to integrate with any other CI system that you may be using, giving your developers early feedback on the overall vulnerability and compliance posture of what they're developing. The two things that are left to mention on this particular slide is both the console and the Defender are just Docker containers, which means they can basically live anywhere that Docker runs. And so upgrades are very straightforward. Managing them is very straightforward. I'm going to talk specifically about compliance. This is a compliance-oriented webinar. So Twistlock provides over 90 out-of-the-box checks covering Docker and Kubernetes CIS benchmarks. This is, of course, customizable via OpenSCAP. So if you have a large compliance library that you've already built and it's in the standard format, you can upload all these checks to Twistlock, and it'll go ahead and run them just like we do out of the box. Twistlock provides a trusted images capability, allowing you to define what runs in your environment, where it runs, what you do trust as a source. The trusted images capability combined with compliance rules give you enormous control and over what is running in your containerized environment. And then we give you a Compliance Explorer dashboard that kind of allows you to view the overall compliance posture of your environment across containers, hosts, and images in real time and over time. So you can measure your improved compliance posture to whatever rules you may want set over time. Adding compliance rules to Twistlock are really straightforward. These are some of the rules that we ship with out of the box. You can see we give you the ability to ignore, alert, or block, depending on how you want it configured. By default, everything ships with alert. It's all the CIS benchmarks applied, not specific to any one particular environment, but you do have the ability to customize these to specific compliance environments, say PCI, HIPAA, GDPR, FISMA. And then you get the ability to apply these rules to whatever resources you want in your environment: containers, images, hosts, labels, taking advantage of the tools in the Docker ecosystem. On the next screen, and it'll refresh in just a second, you're going to see the output of our compliance rules. You'll see where those compliance rules are applied, the overall posture of a running container. Here's an example container with the compliance details. You can see the severity, the ranking of those containers, what the actual description is, the unique ID associated with a given compliance rule. We give you information about the image, where it originated, what the image ID is, and you get this for every single running compliance. You also get all of this compliance information extended down to the host. So Twistlock's, again, giving you the ability to manage compliance from a host perspective for your container ecosystem, but also the running containers themselves, as well as tools such as schedulers, etc. The last slide is an example customer, and it should refresh in just one second. Example customer who's using the tooling that Twistlock provides to manage HIPAA compliance. They're a cloud service provider that leverages AWS, and they use Twistlock's tooling to manage their compliance posture for their customers. They're obviously highly regulated. They have a lot of customer data that's exposed in there. ClearDATA, it provides the managed services for healthcare on AWS. And Twistlock allows ClearDATA to monitor and enforce their compliance requirements. ClearDATA is also taking advantage of all the other capabilities and features that we ship. They're using us for runtime protection, vulnerability management. They've integrated us in their CI system, but really the thing that's most critical to ClearDATA and what they rely on us most heavily for is ensuring they're compliant with the regulatory standards that they have to meet. And with that, we have some time for Q&A.
Okay, great. Thanks, Patrick. So we'll transition into the Q&A. Okay, so first question here is, how can we use Twistlock if we are hosting a Kubernetes cluster in AWS using ECR but not using ECS?
So Twistlock is somewhat agnostic. We natively support Kubernetes and have for quite a long time in the product. So Twistlock gives you some scripts and tooling and helps you generate the example YAMLs you would need to deploy Twistlock Defenders as daemon sets.
Okay, great. Another question here. What are some of the most common compliance issues that today's enterprises struggle with when leveraging containers?
I think there's, and Omar, I hope you don't mind if I answer this. I think I see customers struggling with two things. One, I think the first thing is, are they developing containers in line with the components that make up the image? Are they in line with the standards? Are they kind of in a posture that the organization's comfortable with, or do they even know what's in them? And of course, Twistlock gives you the ability to know what's in the images. We have to know that in order for us to work. So that's kind of the first thing is, when your build process are you using things that are aligned with the compliance policy, and are you building, and then are you deploying the containers in runtime in line with best practices. So are you allowing containers to run in privileged mode, which is generally something you shouldn't do. Privileged mode gives you sort of unfettered access that's not really well auditable across the system. There's all kinds of checks associated with this that really impact the runtime environment that I see customers struggling with and trying to understand how, kind of what the impacts are to their business, because things do change a little bit. Containers and the images based on the containers are based on, it's kind of a little bit different paradigm than sort of long-lived virtual machines from the old world. They're also far less complex in a lot of ways, so you get to take advantage of a lot of a known attack surface if you have mature practices for developing them.
Okay, great. Next question for you, Patrick, is do you see more compliance issues earlier or later in the software development lifecycle, such as development versus production?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes back to the other point. I see more compliance issues in runtime simply because that's where more of the focus is. There's more of a data security surface there. But that's just because you're actually instantiating something that someone else can access, right? So that is serving a purpose. Whereas, you know, in the development lifecycle, there are images, and so there's a certain set of standards and best practices you need to adhere to when you're developing images, making sure you're not shipping secrets around, making sure that you're you're developing containers that don't necessarily have to be instantiated as root. You know, there are definitely some things that need to push left into development that are sort of fundamental related to best practices, and you know, Twistlock obviously helps you do that. We also have written a number of things that kind of give you an assessment of kind of how you can start secure development practices for containers and images. And the Container Security Guide is probably the foundational thing I would start with. That niche special publication SP-190, because it'll give you a good feel for what things look like. In development, you know, honestly, I think you're more worried about, there are certainly compliance rules, but you're more worried about what components you're using and if they're vulnerable, because those do come into play in runtime. And you can make a significant improvement to your overall compliance and security posture by giving developers early feedback on how they're shipping vulnerable components around in their infrastructure.
Excellent. So on that note, and a kind of a related question is, does Twistlock have any solution around secrets management?
Oh yeah. So secrets management is one of those things that you kind of have to be aware of, given the nature of containers. So Twistlock integrates with a couple of password vaults that are typically used in this in this ecosystem. So we have out-of-the-box integrations with HashiCorp Vault and CyberArk Enterprise Password Vault, where you can use Twistlock to instantiate secrets into containers at runtime when they're started up. Twistlock doesn't actually manage those secrets. We're really a pass-through. We want to be able to inject secrets into containers at the last possible moment, and is either environmental variables or files, and make sure that you're not shipping secrets and data around in those images that would otherwise lead to a compromise.
All right, awesome. Next question here is, does Twistlock identify images as trusted based after analysis of the image?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things. I mean, this is a rather complex question, because really what counts as a trusted image is really up to the sort of infrastructure owner. We don't natively know what's trusted unless we've been told what you're trusted. So you can absolutely take the data that Twistlock gives you from a compliance and vulnerability perspective in your CI/CD process, and then tag those images as trusted as they're promoted across your environment, and then use Twistlock in runtime to enforce only running trusted images. But a lot of the criteria of what you consider trusted is really down to your environment. Like, are you only consider images trusted if they're based on Alpine instead of, say, Ubuntu? Are you only going to consider images trusted if they come from a specific registry? that they've sort of been signed by a specific developer. I mean, it's kind of, there's a lot of variability there. We give you the tools to be able to make decisions definitively about what is trusted in runtime, but a lot of that sort of trust foundation has to come about on what your development process looks like and the decisions you make in deciding what you're going to run.
Okay, great. Next question here is, how does Twistlock protect against zero-day attacks when using intelligence stream?
So there's really two things that Twistlock does to protect you against zero days. We have zero-day specific feeds. So we go out to specific providers and use their data to bring it into the environment. That's really what the intelligence stream is doing. But Twistlock provides you broader coverage against 0 days in the sense of runtime. Because one of the things Twistlock does, and we didn't talk about it a lot in the webinar, is Twistlock's building a whitelist security model based on images and based on observing container behavior at runtime. So we're doing a bunch of static analysis for what a container or what an image actually contains. And then we're observing a container as it runs for a specific period and building a model for what known behavior for a container is. And then we're enforcing that model. So we give you the ability to enforce that model. So you can alert, prevent, or block behavior that is outside of our model behavior across processes, network events, file system writes, and system calls. And because we've modeled this container behavior, 0 days typically do some sort of anomalous behavior. They either change a file system, they cause a process to act in an unpredictable way, or spawn up new processes. And once we've modeled a container and associated with it with an image, you've really locked down all the attack vectors for breaking into a container or breaking out of a container once it's been running. So we combine the intelligence data we have with a runtime model. And those two aspects really lock down the container environment. We're also doing similar things for the host. We didn't talk a lot about it, but we extend this runtime protection down to the host and the modeling down to the host level as well. Typically, container hosts tend to not change a lot. They're typically purpose-built to run containers and thus lend themselves to being modeled pretty well because they're not general Linux systems, as an example.
All right, great. So we saw, next question is, we saw the highlight around HIPAA compliance. Do AWS and Twistlock include any other compliance regimes with regard to containers?
So Twistlock provides, the HIPAA compliance is a subset of the CIS benchmarks. We include tune towards HIPAA protection. We offer you similar views, and so say PCI, in a PCI environment, you can tune Twistlocks, and we give you the ability to automatically tune Twistlock compliance regimes for PCI environments. We actually have a PCI security guide that we'll happily share out after this. But yeah, the short answer is, yeah, Twistlock will give you all the protection for PCI as it relates to your container stack, GDPR, FISMA, and we're constantly adding. So we're curious if customers do have other compliance regimes they're kind of trying to live under and what that looks like. So, you know, we didn't mention it, but over half of our features that we do ship do come directly from customers and understanding what challenges they're facing. And Omar, I'll turn it over to you for that second part.
Sure, yeah, on the AWS side, so, you know, we've achieved a number of industry recognized certifications and accreditations around compliance. Of course, HIPAA, PCI, many of the SOC compliances, many federal and governmental regulation industries. We really have a shared security model with our customers. So while we have achieved those certifications on our data centers, our services that we provide to the customers, it's really up to the customers to then go and implement the proper controls and features in their own environment. That can be included inside the application, inside their infrastructure, on the network, around the way they do security. So you can use constructs that are available within AWS or work with our partners such as Twistlock to extend some of those capabilities to meet any specific security objectives that you have. Many of those certifications that we have are available publicly on our website, and some of them are available under NDA to our customers. So customers that we have NDA with, we can share those certifications with, and they can see the outcomes of the audits and what those reports sort of display.
So Omar, there are a couple questions in here I wanted to get to, if you're okay with kind of going through them as well.
Sure.
Sure. One of the questions is, do you recommend Twistlock for securing CI/CD, and are there specific use cases or partnerships around container security that you would like to call out? We explicitly recommend Twistlock for securing CI/CD and really giving developers feedback. That's kind of one of the core elements of the product. That's why we have a native plugin for Jenkins. You know, that's why that's where you can take advantage of Twistlock's vulnerability and compliance scanning. And that's, you know, we work with any Docker V1, V2 compatible registry. So, you know, we really leave a lot of this to customers to define what tools they want to integrate with, and we've written the product such that you can integrate Twistlock with any tool. That's why we have the API open. That's why we have some of the command line tooling available. So if you're not using Jenkins, you can still take advantage of Twistlock's capabilities. And then the next one I wanted to talk about is, how does Twistlock identify a model if the behavior is good or bad? And this is probably a point of clarification to my earlier comments. We are not assigning a good or a bad value to behavior. What we're doing is really saying this behavior is modeled or it's not modeled. If it's either contained within the model that we've observed, or it's outside of the model. And if it's contained in the model, it's understood. If it's outside of the model, we either need to expand the model to include it, or it is anomalous behavior that we should alert, prevent, or block on. And I hope that provides a clarification. It's easy to say good or bad behavior. It really depends on your perspective and how sort of you built out the model. Twistlock builds models automatically, but it is not uncommon for customers to start modeling and stop modeling manually to capture specific traffic or events. And it's also sometimes customers trigger an addendum to the learning model so they can capture additional activity. Say you have a job that in a longer running container that only runs every 48 hours or 96 hours or once a week, and you'd want to add that to the runtime model and then shut the runtime model down so you know that anything beyond that's captured.
Great. I'm going to take a few more here since we've got some time. Next question is, how do you update your threat feed with new data that could pose a risk to my organization? And do you have any mechanisms for notifying or alerting users of any new risks that could impact compliance?
That's a great question. So Twistlock Intelligence Stream is really the update source, and we update it whenever there's new information available. So it's updated a ton of times a day, actually, because we're gathering so much data from so many upstream sources. And then we are automatically updating the installed consoles. So we're not going out and sort of touching customer environments. The consoles connect automatically to the intelligence stream and listen for events on it. And then they get pushed down. Generally, this is happening every 24 hours. But if there's a new zero-day out that comes out from, say, one of the zero-day providers, that's a sort of push notification to subscribers to the intelligence stream is being set, and that data is being taken all the way down in. We also, we also have a mature support organization, but since we're not taking data out of customer infrastructures, we're not saying, okay, well, we know you're running, we have 100 customers running this particular version of this particular package, and we need to notify them. The console that lives in customer environments that isn't sending data back out to us, it knows about that, and you can configure the console to let you know when there's new information out there. That's one of the advantages to Twistlock is we know everything that's running in your environment. So when something new comes in that's impacting maybe a brand new package that never had a CVE associated with it, we know that it's running. We know there's a new CVE, and we're going to tell you about it.
Okay, great. Let's go ahead and take one last one here, and then we'll wrap it up. Question is, does Twistlock provide the ability to implement internal compliance policies as opposed to just the industry standard regimes?
Yeah, so if you've got compliance policies that you want to import, we do have the import capability in the product. Typically, these are an open SCAP, and So you can absolutely import your own. They do need to be in a surface area that we do cover for the product. So there are some things that kind of nuances there to talk about, but you can absolutely import your own compliance policies. You don't have to be constrained to the CIS benchmarks that we're shipping.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Patrick. On that note, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's webinar. Just want to thank everyone for attending, and if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.